Just make sure this is being recorded. And we're good on recording?
Yeah, you can record.
Okay. Okay. We should be good.
Nice. Thank you.
Okay.
Recording. Just pushing.
Alrighty. Thanks for coming back and bearing with us. Okay. So I'll just backtrack just a little bit. When it comes to holding our product teams accountable, so usually UX designers, UX researchers, generalists, content strategists are working really closely with product teams and incorporating what we learn about users into the products that the organization is building. So here are some ways that I have, being on different product teams and working with different product teams and different engagement models, here are some ways that I've helped them to hold true to what it is that we're learning about users and really center that in what we're building. So the first thing is, when it comes to the product planning process and road mapping what the next quarter or half or year is going to look like for an organization, UX researchers, designers should be right in that process, and you should really advocate for yourself to be a part of that process, because it's really going to be important to make sure that based on how we build and what they're planning for the future is based in research that we've done or what we know about users or what we've learned. Because really being user-centered is allowing users to come into that room, right, and have a voice at the table, and that voice comes through UXers or the people that interface directly with those users, right? You know, they share their stories and their needs and wants with us, and we're supposed to bring that into the room and make sure that that is shared with product teams. So the road mapping process, kind of when we decide to build what, that should be based on priorities that are revealed through user research. The next thing is longitudinal experience tracking. So that means once we've built something, we've done all the research, we've validated it, we've tested, we've iterated on it, everything's all good, and we decide to release it, we have to continue to track what the experience is and create a feedback loop for users to share how they're experiencing the project longitudinally, so over time, right? So we release a great product, that's fantastic, but we need to make sure that we incorporate a way for folks to continuously share their feedback with us, because times are going to change, needs are going to change, the users that you're reaching is going to change. So you need to make sure that the company or the product team is keeping a pulse on how people are experiencing the product. Okay. Another thing that's going to be really important is balancing the user needs and what the business needs, right? So when it comes to the objectives and the key results of a business, obviously businesses are here to make money, right? And there are different pathways to doing that and different streams, right? And so we just need to make sure that in kind of prioritizing the needs that come through, the user's needs are up there, right? And I find that there can sometimes be a little tension between, you know, product who their key goal is to like move things fast and to ship things and to, you know, publish them and get there, right? And oftentimes as UX researchers and designers, our priority is to ensure that the user experience is the best that it can be, right? So in places where that conflicts, we need to prioritize the user, right? Because when it comes down to it, and I tell, you know, product teams that I've been on, is we have the same goal, right? We want to build really great products because that's going to be the best thing for the business and the best thing for the people that are using our products. So building those relationships and collaborating with your product teams is going to be really important to do beforehand, so that they trust you to do the research and they trust the findings that are coming out of the research enough to incorporate them well. Okay. So this is something that I shared before, but just wanted to touch on it again, is that when journey mapping or looking at how consumers experience a product or anything, right, or do a task, it's so important to understand the moments that matter to them. So what are the distinguishable common moments across similar journeys where users need something specific or have a specific friction or something that frustrates them? Because like I said earlier, it's a lot easier to find a behavior, find a friction point or a pain point that you can resolve and find those moments across the user journey where there's a product like yours can add value, or a product that you haven't built yet could add value potentially. And that's much easier and much more efficient to do it that way. And it's more user-centered to do it that way than to build something and then try to change user behavior because we want them to use this new thing because we think it's better, right? It has to come from the user, right? It's going to be a lot easier on the organization and a lot easier on us as UXers as well. So it's really important to emphasize this with the organizations that you work with, or, if you're working on building something for a founder, if you're building something for yourself, right? Starting with the customer journey and understanding where the user is coming from is going to be your best bet. Cool. So I wanted to take y'all through a very, very simple journey map that I did. This is actually part of an interview process that I had at a company. And so towards the end of the interview process, they asked me, here are a list of questions, pick a question, and then present a case study, right? And so when as some of you may know, I'm a UX researcher in my day job, but I also coach UX researchers. So I coach researchers who are looking to break into UX research and tech, or folks who are looking to transfer their skill sets over. Maybe they've been in clinical research or academia and want to come into user research, and lots of those skills are transferable. And so the number one question I get from clients is, how do I get experience if no one will hire me because I don't have experience, right? And that's the quintessential problem that a lot of people face. But I tell people all the time, you don't have to have a full-time UX research role or UX design role in order to do UX design or research, right? Like, users are all around us, and there are a plethora of problems to solve, right? And questions to ask. And so I picked a question, and I decided to ask a bunch of my friends what they thought about it, and then build a journey map around it. So I'll take you through this very quick case study. So the problem statement that I chose is that moving homes, or moving to a new home, is consistently rated as one of life's most stressful events. How can this experience be reshaped? And so questions like, problem statements or questions like this, especially when it comes to like interview processes, are purposely vague because they want to see what your strategy or what your approach in taking a really big problem and then focusing it into something that can be fixed, or something that can be iterated around, right? So the first thing that I did when looking at this question is I did a little bit of market research, right? So I looked at what are some things that play into the cost of moving to a new home, right? So like things like the size of the home that you're moving to and from, the distance you're moving, gas, whether you're hiring help or not, and then I found all these things that I had no idea about, right? All these different fees that companies charge. Is there an extra stop? Do we have to carry it for a long time once we do park the truck? Are there stairs at a house? And just like, et cetera, et cetera. I looked at the average user costs and what it costs for different types of moves. And then it was important to me to gather the key stakeholders that this information or this data that I was gathering on users mattered to. So who had a hand in redesigning this experience and making it better for users, right? So companies like those who orchestrate your move, truck rental companies, marketplaces where people can go and ask for help or tasks or labor, moving site comparison sites. So like built this long list of all of the stakeholders who would like to know this knowledge of where we can make this experience better so they can design for their users, right? Then the next thing for me was to design the UX research, right? So I had some questions around what people wanted in a moving experience and kind of what stuck out for them, what was really frustrating. And so I chose 8 of my friends and I really simply like shot them a text and said, hey, can we talk for about 30 minutes about the last time you moved to a new house? And the folks were happy to do it. I didn't have to incentivize them or send them gift cards or anything because they were people that I knew. But like I said, like people are all around, and moving is something that most people have to do several times within their lifetime, right? So I chose a sample of 8. And this was because in doing qualitative research, when it comes to discovering as many user problems or things that will come up in these interviews, it kind of tapers out around 6, 7, 8, right? So if I did, I could have done 10, I could have done 12, but I likely wouldn't have heard more kind of frustrations or different types of experiences than I did in those first core 8 people. I made sure that I was talking to people of different age groups, talking to people in different locations, talking to people who had moved different distances. So some people moved, within the same city, down the street, 10 minutes away. Some people moved across the country. I made sure to talk to people who were moving and living by themselves versus someone who was moving with a family or a couple. And then whether they hired movers to help them or whether they did it themselves or, invited their friends over to help them move the heavy furniture. I listed some of the questions that I had, right? So these are the questions that I asked directly for in the interviews. And I started out with an introduction of myself, of course. I did a warm-up activity, and it's really important to, when you're having any type of conversation as far as UX research and you're coming in and asking them to share some of their story with you, to really make sure that they're able to get comfortable, right? So I always warm up with something that's kind of easy to answer, kind of just to like break the ice, because oftentimes there's this dynamic of, the user coming in and saying, I hope what I have to say is helpful, right? Or I hope I'm answering the right questions or saying the right answers, even though there are no right answers, right? So it's always going to be really important to warm up. And then I asked them the questions that you see on the screen. When it came to the journey, based on the 8 conversations that I had, I broke up the journey pretty distinctly based on what people kind of like defined into the planning phase. So planning the move, looking for a new place to live, packing up all the stuff, moving day in particular, transporting all the stuff from point A to point B, and then unpacking. And this is the user journey that I built. Now, I'm not a designer. So I did not design the template myself, but there are tons and tons of templates out there. Like you can just Google journey map template and then find one that meets your needs and plug in your information. Right? So I mentioned those 5 different parts of the journey that people mentioned when they were telling me their stories. Right? So in the planning phase, packing, moving day, transport, and this line here represents kind of like their needs, expectations, and how they were met at different points in the journey, right? So when it came to the planning phase, generally people find moving really exciting, right? So this is a pretty good experience when it comes to that. So I demarcated that here. And then some of the frustrations when it comes to planning, right, is the legwork that it takes to find homes that meet their living standards, timing, right? Finding a home that's available when you need it to be available. I talked to a lot of young people who were moving home and, had finished college and were transitioning back. And so the planning was more around like, okay, lifestyle, what is going to change and things like that. Then we get to the packing phase. So generally, right, based on who I talked to, packing is pretty simple and relatively low stress once they have the boxes and the tape and things like that. But there were some users, right? So not necessarily the main journey, but some journeys involved customers who have time in between homes. So like, I'm moving here at this date, but I have some time in between when I have to get out of my last place. So for consumers who had that time in between home, it was pretty stressful to find storage units, right, that met their needs, right? Because they can be expensive, they can be really inconvenient. And customers just like to avoid them whenever possible. When it came to moving day, one of the key frustrations is that it's usually a really long day. There's multiple things you have to cover. There's multiple people you have to coordinate with. And so overall, it's very stressful. And this is a point of frustration for customers. Then when it came to transport, customers often exceed the budget, right? And there are like last minute costs that come up and unexpected obstacles. And then the last phase, unpacking. People are generally excited to, be settled and get into their new home. A good part of this part of the journey is that it's the hardest part is over, right? Now is the fun time to get to move in and put things where they are and design places, right? So as I was presenting this to the product team that I was interviewing with, when looking at kind of where we have the best opportunity to change the experience or make the experience better and have the biggest impact possible are at these points where there's high friction and high frustration, right? At moments where having a solution to this or making this better is going to really drive a lot of users to, use whatever you're designing because the frustration is high already, right? So instead of saying, hey, folks, use this thing, if I say, hey, demonstrate like, hey, this thing solves this problem, people are automatically going to gravitate once they're aware of it. Okay? So this is what's been helpful of user journeying, and like it doesn't have to be, complicated. It can be something super simple. It can be something you do over a course of days, and just talking to people. Especially if you're building a product that kind of everyone uses, you can even talk to people who work at the company, right? Who aren't close to the product, right? And who aren't biased by wanting to see the product succeed, but just like talking to people like, for example, everyone moves, right? Lots of people take transport, lots of people take taxis. Like you can ask almost anyone for their feedback on the experience. Okay, so I will stop there so that we can hopefully have some questions. Hopefully we still have time. Yeah, thanks for listening, and super excited to hear any questions that folks have. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn. My website for the coaching that I talked about is UX Out Loud, and I'm also on Instagram at UX Out Loud. Eric, I will pass this back to you.
Awesome, thank you. Great. Let me say a last great again. Thank you so much, Eniola, for this very insightful presentation and the time you had to take off your busy schedule to share with us. I think that the floor is open for any questions, if there is, or there are. Any questions from the audience? Hello, community. Any questions before we wrap up?
Yeah. And things don't necessarily have to be about user journeys. They can be kind of about anything UX. Just keep in mind, I'm a UX researcher, so that's what I know.
I guess we have a question from Tiffany. Kindly go for it, Tiffany.
Hi, Eniola. I'm Tiffany. I'm from Canada, actually, and I saw this posted on LinkedIn, so thank you for hosting this. In the past, with journey maps that I've created, and one was particularly for renewing a mortgage at a bank here in Canada, we highlighted all the pain points, all the opportunities to improve the experience, and we passed it off to the product team. And not one of those opportunities have been addressed. Mm-hmm. So how do you kind of, in your experience, how do you kind of keep that journey map alive? How do you make sure, like you said, we're in charge of making that product team accountable? So what kind of tips would you have as far as once that journey map's created, how do you keep it, how do you keep the momentum going with that journey map and not just let it end up in a folder somewhere and die off?
Mm-hmm. Okay, love the question. Thank you. So one of the things when I'm starting a UX research project or conducting something, so like even before I would do the journey map, making sure that I have buy-in from the different stakeholders that I'm looking for it to influence, right? So if you're working with a product team, like kicking off the project and saying, hey, like what are some gaps in the knowledge? What are you looking to do? What are your objectives? And making sure that their research questions or their objectives are incorporated into the journey map that you do, because it's going to make it a lot more specific for them and a lot more actionable, right? Because I've had tons of recommendations. I have recommendations all day. Like, I think you should do this, this, and this. But if it's not actionable for the team, or if it's not kind of in the language they're looking for, or specifically geared towards the goals that they're looking for, it might go unused. So, it's not a perfect solution, right? Sometimes it happens where you have to continue to socialize and pull at different teams who work around similar things to understand what is actionable for them, and how can the findings that you found or the journeys that you explored be most efficiently incorporated into the work that they're doing. It does take time, right? Like it is like a consistent process over time, but getting their buy-in and kind of like helping or asking them to collaborate with you and building out the research that's going to reveal the journey map has them a lot more like bought in, and they're much more likely to use the information or trust the recommendations that come out of it.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And I think our area fell down when at the very beginning, when you're talking about getting the stakeholder buy-in and making sure that what we're addressing in the journey map aligns to what they're trying to do. We didn't have a stakeholder when we first did this. It was basically one of our experience design teams wanted to map out the journey and then hope that somebody would take this and do something with it. So in the end, you're right, like that, we weren't even set up for success from the beginning. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for the question. I see my namesake has a question, Eniola.
Yeah, Eniola, can you pick it up?
It's a little hard to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
It's very faint. Do you mind typing the question in the chat?
So can you hear me now?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay, so I said thank you so much for already now. It was really insightful. I learned some thoughts already. So I want to understand, is there a link between a user journey, a customer journey, and a product mapping? So like what can you say the link between them? And do you also carry out user research for a product mapping when you're actually mapping out the products based on quarter 1, quarter 2, and all of that, or based on your MVPs, and and all of that. So does it require the 5 ways of carrying out understanding the user, like you mentioned, heuristic, evaluation, user research, data analytics, and all of that? Does it require all of that for product mapping as the same as customer journey? Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, it was very hard to hear. What I did pick up is I think you asked about a correlation between journey mapping and product road mapping.
Yes.
Okay. And then was there another question that I missed?
I was just asking that, and I was asking how do you have to carry out what's listed in the beginning of the webinar where you said understanding your users, and you mentioned some things on that like data analysis and user research. Do you have to also do that in product mapping? Do you understand? All of that, heuristic evaluation and all of that, yeah.
Okay. Oh, how those play into product road mapping.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, it seems like you have product road mapping heavy on your mind, which is great. Okay, so when it comes to the journey map, that plays into your product road mapping when it comes to prioritization, right? So when we decide when we're building what and what we're focusing on first, those should be those things where on the journey map, those were those like red, high frustration, really poor experience points, because we should prioritize fixing the things that are deterrents or that are really like causing the most frustration in a user journey. So when it comes to the product roadmap and product teams understanding what the journey looks like, seeing the kind of the big items, the items where if you solve them, there's a lot of potential for either new users or making existing users happy. So in prioritizing and helping the product team prioritize in a way that's user-centered, sharing with them those high friction points and the high frustration points on the journey as key moments that really matter in the journey, and there's opportunity where we can add value, that's going to help a lot on that prioritization front. And it's our responsibility to really make sure that we're driving prioritization that incorporates, the top things that users have in mind, right? And then we can move on to the things that are nice to have, or the things that innovate and take us even further. But we have to solve the problems that exist first. When it comes to the other things that I mentioned, around ways to like learn about users, like on the slide before. I think they all play into one, building trust with your product team, right? So as you collaborate and you kind of explore different elements about the user experience, it's going to be really important for folks to see just how much UX research can reveal, right? Like it's a really, really awesome tool as far as learning how to build the best thing possible for the market that you're trying to build for. So like over time, kind of starting out with smaller things and then delivering insights and showing people these are insights that can come out of UX research if we prioritize it, right? And then also showing that like we don't necessarily have to do UX research for every type of question, but based on the things that we're learning, keeping a list of trends that we're seeing. So if we do research with a group over and over again, right, for different types of products, and we see a theme is they want to have lots of control over the experience that they have, right? That's a theme that we should then say to the product team, like, hey, as we roadmap and as we build new things and we iterate on the products that we have currently, we need to keep this theme in mind. Keep in mind that our users like to have control. So everything that we build, let's make sure that we're incorporating that into what we build. Does that make sense?
Nice, nice. Thank you for that. I
Yes,
think we would have
yes.
to take.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Eniola. We'll have to take one last question before we wrap up, if there is
There's a quick one.
any question. A last slot before we wrap up.
I think we can wrap up here, but again, like keep in touch and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and if any questions come afterwards, just feel free to say hi or send a message.
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much, Eniola, for your time, and to our audience, we are so grateful for your time as well. We'll connect again in the next month. Thank you and have a great evening. Ciao, bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.